Look at this machine. Really look at it. It's just a wooden crate, some wire mesh, a hand crank, and a few rotating drums. It looks innocent. It looks like something you'd find gathering dust in the back of an antique shop or sitting harmlessly in a middle school history textbook. We are taught that this box, the cotton gin, was a triumph of American ingenuity, a simple tool that made life easier. But that is a lie. This box is not a hero of the Industrial Revolution. It is a villain. This machine is a weapon. And when Eli Whitney finished tightening the screws on this prototype in 1793, he didn't just invent a way to clean cotton. He resurrected a monster that was on the verge of dying, and he fed it the lives of millions of human beings. To understand the true, terrifying weight of this object, we have to strip away the myth of progress and look at the blood on the gears. Because this is the story of how capitalism, when left unchecked, doesn't just innovate, it devours. Let's transport ourselves back to the American South in 1790. The picture is very different from the Gone with the Wind empire we imagine. The truth is, the South was failing. It was broke. For decades, their entire economy had been addicted to tobacco. But tobacco is a parasite. It sucks the nutrients out of the soil until the land turns to dust. The soil across Virginia and Maryland was exhausted, yields were plummeting, and the plantation owners were panicking. They were facing a massive economic depression, and because it was all about the money, the very institution of slavery was actually in danger of collapsing. It wasn't a moral awakening. It was cold, hard math. It cost money to feed, house, and guard enslaved people. If the crops aren't selling, the enslaved workforce becomes a liability. The founding fathers, men like Jefferson and Washington, actually believed slavery might just fade away naturally because it simply wasn't profitable anymore. The peculiar institution was on life support. The South was sitting on a potential solution, but they couldn't unlock it. They had cotton, specifically short staple cotton. This stuff was resilient. It could grow anywhere, from the coast to the interior. It was green, it was abundant, and it was useless. The problem wasn't growing it, the problem was cleaning it. Short staple cotton is filled with sticky, green seeds that are tangled tight into the fibers. To get usable cotton, you had to pick those seeds out by hand. Imagine the physical sensation of that work, your fingers cramping, bleeding, pulling at sticky burrs for 14 hours a day. An enslaved person working from sunrise to absolute pitch blackness could only process about 1 single pound of cotton. 1 pound. It was an economic bottleneck so tight that it made the crop worthless. The South was starving while sitting on a gold mine, all because they couldn't get the seeds out fast enough. Enter the disruptor, Eli Whitney. He isn't a Southern planter. He's a generic New England tinkerer, a Yale graduate with a mountain of debt and a talent for mechanics. He travels to Georgia for a tutoring job that falls through, and he ends up crashing at the plantation of Catherine Green. He's an outsider. He listens to the locals complaining about their worthless cotton crops, and he doesn't see an agricultural problem. He sees a geometry puzzle. He sees a mechanical failure. Whitney locks himself in a workshop during the winter of 1792. He's obsessed. Legend says he got the idea watching a cat try to pull a chicken through a fence. The claws came through with feathers, but the chicken stayed behind. True or not, that's the mechanic. He builds a wooden drum embedded with wire hooks. As you turn the crank, the hooks bite into the cotton and rip it through a mesh screen. The mesh is too fine for the seeds, so they get stripped off and fall away. A second drum spins with bristles to brush the clean lint off the hooks. It is brutally simple. It is genius. And it is catastrophic. When Whitney demonstrated this machine, the math changed instantly. One man operating a hand-cranked gin could now process 50 pounds of cotton in a day, 50 times the output. If you hooked it up to a water wheel or a horse, you could process 1,000 pounds. The bottleneck didn't just open, it exploded. Whitney thought he had invented a labor-saving device. He wrote to his father bragging that his machine would make labor easy. But he didn't understand the first rule of capitalism. When you make a commodity easier to produce, you don't produce the same amount with less work. You produce infinitely more. The impact was instantaneous and violent. Short staple cotton went from a weed to white gold. In 1790, the U.S. produced a negligible 1.5 million pounds of cotton. By 1810, barely a generation later, that number rocketed to 85 million pounds. The South transformed into the Saudi Arabia of the 19th century, a monopoly supplier for the starving textile mills of the British Empire. But here is the dark paradox, the unintended consequence that Whitney didn't foresee or chose to ignore. The gin automated the cleaning, but it did nothing for the planting or the picking. The machine got hungry. To feed the insatiable maw of the cotton gins, planters needed more land. They pushed west, decimating indigenous populations to seize Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and to work that stolen land, they needed bodies. This is where the story gets truly horrific. The cotton gin didn't replace enslaved labor. It exponentially increased the demand for it. The price of an enslaved man skyrocketed. The Upper South, where tobacco was dead, suddenly found a new industry, slave breeding. They began selling human beings down the river to the new cotton fields of the Deep South. This was the second Middle Passage. Between the Revolution and the Civil War, 1 million enslaved people were torn from their families in Virginia and Maryland and force-marched in chains to the hellscape of the Mississippi Delta. We are talking about families systematically dismantled, husbands ripped from wives, children auctioned off from screaming mothers, all to ensure that the cotton gins never stopped spinning. The gin turned the South into a totalitarian police state, dedicated to the production of a single fiber. By 1860, the value of enslaved human beings in America was greater than the value of all the railroads, factories, and banks in the country combined. And before you start thinking this is just a Southern sin, let's follow the money. The cotton gin didn't just build the South, it built New York City. It built New England. The North likes to pretend it was the moral superior, but the North was the money launderer. Northern ships hauled the cotton. Northern insurers insured the property, which meant the people. Northern banks provided the credit to buy the land and the chains. The industrial textile mills of Massachusetts were spinning cotton picked by enslaved hands. The entire American economy was woven out of this hypocrisy. The nation was two different societies, one free, one slave, locked together in a death spiral by the economics of this one machine. In a final, bitter twist of irony, Eli Whitney never got rich from the cotton gin. His patent was pirated instantly. Farmers just built their own copies in their barns because the design was so simple. Whitney spent years in court fighting for pennies. He actually made his real fortune later, pivoting to a different industry, arms manufacturing. He pioneered the system of interchangeable parts for muskets. So, in the end, the man who built the machine that revitalized slavery also built the manufacturing techniques that allowed the Union Army to create the weapons that would finally destroy it. So, the next time you see a picture of the cotton gin in a museum, don't just see a clever invention. See the engine of a tragedy. See the reason why the Civil War became inevitable. It serves as a brutal reminder that innovation is not always progress. Efficiency is not always good. And sometimes the things we build to solve our problems end up creating nightmares far worse than the ones we were trying to escape.